Today we will be discussing about the Spring MVC architecture. Now let us understand the request of the life cycle, request and the response cycle in the Spring MVC architecture. So over here first, if you observe, whenever the request comes, it will go to the main servlet that is called as the dispatcher servlet. So this dispatcher servlet is your front controller. Your front controller will decide, then the front controller will contact this handler mapping. Then it will decide that the request should go to which controller, which handler mapping you are using. Then the request will go to this controller. And after this one, again, it will create the model in view, then finally the view resolver. And from the view resolver, it will go to the view, and finally the response is sent to the client. Okay, we will discuss about all these things step by step. Now, over here, if you see dispatcher servlet, first you need to configure the dispatcher servlet. That is, the Spring will provide a servlet, but that is by the name dispatcher servlet. The Spring will provide a servlet by name dispatcher servlet. So rb.springframework.pep.servlet.dispatcher servlet. So this dispatcher servlet will act as a fun controller for the Spring Web application, and all the requests that are coming with .htm or the request coming with .htm will go to this dispatcher servlet. All the requests coming with .htm extension will go to this .htm request. So let us first create that. So let us create a Spring Web layer. So you've got web layer, service layer, and then the persistence layer. So all the requests that is coming to the web layer will go to this training-servlet.xml. So file, new uh, project. So over here you have got various stuff. So from this again you can select Spring MVC project, and let us give the name Spring MVC. Click next. Top level name you can give com.example. Now over here, let us do it by scratch. That would be better. At later point of time, okay, you can do it. You can directly go with the Spring project. As of now, let us do it with Start Dynamic Project. Spring PC. Click Next. Click Next. Okay. So over here under Spring MVC, right click, click New. Uh, so first let us add the properties. Java build path and add library, user library, Spring. Okay, fine. Spring JSTLF required. AOP we don't require. Let us leave that. And then click deploy. Click add. Java build path entries. Click next. So add these two files to the build path. And your Spring MVC project is set up. Now you can go to this web folder, and under here what we have is web.xml file. Here you need to specify the servlet name, the dispatcher servlet name. If you're using Spring Starter project, it will create it by yourself. Just to have an idea, we'll do it. Servlet name, dispatcher hyphen servlet. And then servlet class org dot dispatcher servlet. So with this, okay, we have added all this stuff. Okay, by default it has added servlet class. Now the name what we are giving to this one is dispatcher servlet, but generally, okay, this is how we give the name, dispatcher servlet. And then context config location, and where is the configuration file present, where is the Spring configuration file present. Let's say this file is present in webinf slash spring slash spring config dispatcher hyphen servlet.xml. Generally, this is how we give the name. Dispatcher servlet means dispatcher hyphen servlet.xml, and this one will map, or this one will handle all the incoming requests. this file will handle all the incoming requests. So within the webinf folder, you need to create a folder by name Spring, and within this you need to create a Spring config file by name dispatcher servlet. So within this, right click, new, and then where's that particular, this one, Spring MVC. So right click, new, Spring Bean configuration file. Name this file as dispatcher-servlet, and let's finish that. Now you need to enable the controller handling. So where is that context? Context you require, and the Spring MVC. These are the two namespaces what we require. So you require this. And then specify context colon, that is your application is having annotations, and your base package is, right click, new, let us create the base package, com.example.app. So context colon component scan, your base package is com.example.app. So once this two is done, you need to add one more bean. Click browse over here, internal resource view resolver. So this is what you require. Internal resource view resolver. The name what you can give is view resolver. This has got two things. One is prefix, that is the location of the files, inf slash jsp slash. Okay, and add one more suffix is dot .jsp. Click OK. Click finish. So this is what we require. So view resolver, we require an internal resource view resolver. You're using webinf slash jsp.jsp. So you need to create one more folder over here by name JSP. Now, if you have a look at this, first step is you have created the dispatcher servlet. That is, all the requests that are coming to the web application will come to the dispatcher servlet. Then your dispatcher servlet will contact this handler mapping. So now over here, the type of handler mapping we are using is internal resource view resolver. Internal resource view resolver. Now, over here, when it comes to the handler mapping, we will create one class, that is controller class. let's say customer controller. So this class you will annotate it with the symbol @controller and @request mapping, that is so this class will handle all the requests that is coming of type customer.html. So public void show form. So return customer form, that's it. So over here, first what is happening is, let's say okay, you have got a form called, you have form of form, you have a link called customer.html. When you're clicking on this link, the request will go to this dispatcher servlet. Then the dispatcher servlet will connect with the handler mapping. After it connects with the handler mapping, then the Spring handler mapping will check which class, okay, which controller to execute for this customer.html. So for this link, for this customer.html link and the Spring config file, okay, you have customer controller to be executed. You have written this way, customer controller to be executed. So the control now goes to this class. The control will go to this customer controller class, and from there it executes the code, this one, public string show form model name. And then okay, we are just returning one thing, we are returning the view over here. Or else okay, in the model, okay, model dot add attribute, okay, you can put the message good morning, and then okay, you are returning it. Return show message. So let's say okay, you have the message over here, you have a link over here, show message. Now again, if you observe over here from the controller, it has got the model in view, model as well as view, and this it will return to this dispatcher servlet. So that is what it is doing. So you've got model, or else okay, if you just remove this, so you've got model in view, you've got a class called model and view, mv is equal to new model and view. View what you want is show message, and in the model, okay, this is what you're adding. Clear with this? Model in view. View name is show message, and the data what we are adding in the model is message good morning. Whatever you want, you can add. Now again, this request will go to the front controller. Then over here, it will go again to the dispatcher servlet. Then the dispatcher servlet will decide, okay, will take help of view resolver. So your dispatcher servlet will take help of this view resolver beam. So your dispatcher servlet will take help of this view resolver beam. Let me just decrease the size. So the dispatcher servlet will take help of this view resolver file. And the view resolver file, if you see, this one, you have got over here prefix and then the suffix. So this is the prefix and show message, and to this again it adds the suffix value. So simple, your view resolver is useful for constructing the actual name of loop. And finally, you have got the view, that is, it will go to this view and the response is sent to the client. So over here in the JSP page, you need to create a JSP page by name show message. So
Atika, can you hear me? Hello?
show message dot JSP, and over here you can retrieve the message attribute. So dollar of message. Now let us just try this. Right click, run as, run on server. Okay, we need to create one more file, that is the main file index.jsp. So I'll create one more file, that is index.jsp. So over here we will place a link, a href is equal to customer.html. So over here you've got this customer. You click on this. Click on as, run on server. com.example.app. Oh, we need to add one more thing. MVC support. MVC for annotation driven. So this also you need to add. Run as, run on server. So let me add one more. Method is equal to request mapping dot get. What happened? Wait. So click over here. And it's printing this. So this is how this works. Now if you read this, the messages. Now first what it is loading is initializing Spring Framework servlet, that is the dispatcher servlet. If you see this, okay, first the Spring config, it is initializing this dispatcher servlet. And after it does this, then it will go to your Spring config.xml file and it will read all the stuff from there. So over here if you see, once it reads this, then it will go to this location. Loading XML bean definition from the servlet context resource whereby nf spring / dispatcher servlet.xml. And then over here if you see the customer.htm, it is mapped to this controller com.example.customer controller. That is, if the request is of type customer.htm, it is going to hand over the control to this customer controller. So that is what it does. First dispatcher servlet you have, then you can specify the type of mapping you are using, and then it will map the request customer.htm to the customer controller. There you are creating the model and view which you are returning it to the dispatcher servlet. The dispatcher servlet will contact the internal resource view resolver, and then it will generate the actual name of the view, which it then again returns to the dispatcher servlet. The new dispatcher servlet, again it will call the view. Is this clear configuration?
I think I have a question.
Can you please increase the volume of the mic?
Okay, I'll try to do it. 1 second. See. Well, can you hear me now? I think this
Yeah,
is
I can hear
maximum.
you.
Okay. So in the first question is the controller that we created. We can have multiple controllers, right?
Per application, okay, you should have one controller. Generally, okay, when we are doing web applications, there we have multiple controllers, that is multiple servers. But when it comes to the front controller pattern, okay, you will have only one controller, one servlet, and all the requests will come to that servlet. This one is based on the front controller pattern. So in the front controller pattern, you will have only one controller.
No, so this is you're talking about the dispatch servlet. I'm asking about the controller in number 3. Can
Acha,
we have
okay.
multiple?
Yes, you can have multiple controllers.
Okay. And then the only thing is like you use the what do you call the mapping. Can you go to the controller again? Our controller, the code. Customer controller. Yeah. So yeah, the only thing is this value in the request mapping. So I think this just has to be unique across all controllers, right? So it can go
Yes.
to the right. Okay. 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 And then one other question. This model that you added, this is provided by Spring, this object?
Yes, it is provided by Spring.
Okay. And we can also, sorry, I missed the JSP part, but in the JSP, did you read the attribute from the model?
Yes, dollar of MSG. That's it.
Okay, $MSG. Oh, okay. So we didn't do anywhere get attribute model or something like that.
No, no, no. Directly we are making use of EL expressions.
Okay, okay. All right. Okay, thank you.
Okay, welcome. So we'll just have a quick recap of this. So first, in the web.xml file, you need to configure it. Dispatcher servlet, the name for the dispatcher servlet, and we are not writing the code for the dispatcher servlet. So the code for the dispatcher servlet or the code for the front controller is provided by the Spring framework. That is, all the requests coming to the web application will go to this dispatcher servlet. Now your dispatcher servlet should handle all the incoming requests. So this dispatcher servlet will read this configuration file dispatcher-servlet.xml. We are specifying the location, context config location. What is the location in which the config file is present? So it is present in this dispatcher servlet. So your Spring container will read this file and initialize all the beans. So context code annotation driven, MVC annotation driven, and then the base package com.example.app, that is, this is the package that it should scan in order to find all the controllers. So once it does it, it will go to this class customer controller. There it finds that you are mapping this customer.htm to this customer, to the show form method of the customer controller class. So it initializes that, and then it initializes this view resolver bean. And that is when you are showing this show message. Now show message means it should call this one show message.jsp. So this is just the logical name, but the actual name what you have is you need to prefix this with web hyphen inf slash. Within this you're having a folder by name JSP, and then show message, and then the prefix is JSP. This is the actual name of the view, but we are just using the logical name. So again, it will let us, okay, when you are doing this, okay, when this line is executed, again the controller will return to the dispatcher server. Here it will read that you're using internal resource view resolver to resolve the logical view names to the actual name. So the prefix, what it is doing is to the show, what is that? To the show message, the prefix what it is adding is web inf slash JSP, and the suffix what it is adding is .jsp. So the actual name of the view is constructed. I'll go to this view and then display the message. Now over your context loader, a context loader loads the configuration file in addition to the one that dispatches servlet load. So two context loaders to choose from: context load listener and then the context load and the servlet. So context loads listener is used when web container supports servlets 2.3 or higher and initializes servlet listeners before the servlet. Or else okay, you can go with the context load servlet. So context load listener is this one, context load listener, or else context load servlet, or this one. Specify one or more Spring configuration files for the context loader. So it will load these files. So if you're having more than one training service, training data, it will load all those files. So this is the job of this context load servlet. And then okay, you're writing the controller class, and then configure the controller in the dispatcher servlet, configure the view resolver, write the JSP, all this which we have already done. So first step is you will write this controller class. After you have written the controller class and you're configuring the controller in the spring.mvc file, over here you're doing it manually, that is home.htm. It should go to the specific controller. URL mapping you're doing it. Literally you're writing it, but we have done it using the controllers. And then again view resolver, which we have already done, and creating the JSP page. That's it. Clear with this? Now under handler mapping, we have got various different types of handler mapping. So one is the bean name URL handler mapping. So in the bean name URL handle mapping, that is this one, the home controller, the name of the bean is mapped to this home.htm. And the simple URL handler mapping, you have the property, you have an element called property that will map it to the specific controller. So for this bean name URL handler mapping, let's see if we're doing this. Let's say you have written a controller by name class. So your controller is an interface, implements controller. So you have got this handle request and response. So model in view, model in view is equal to new model and view. So by message, add the message to the model mv.add message 1 as by message. Instead of returning null, okay, you return model and then over here you see, okay, we are not annotating this with @controller symbol. If you're not annotating it with the @controller symbol, then you need to register that bean in the Spring config file. Click over here, new bean, and click browse over here. So what is the bean name you have is by controller. So select this, click next, and then finish. Now over here you will specify the URL. over here you will specify the URL. Bean name is equal to this and then class name. So you will specify the URL name is equal to by.html. That if the request is coming from by.html, then it should go to this specific controller class. Now we'll go back to this index.js file, and over here we will add let us run it one more time. So you're using this bean name URL handler mapping. Now over here, whichever mapping class you're using, okay, you need to register that. So over here, if you're using simple URL mapping handler, you should register that. And if in case if you're using this bean name URL handler mapping, then you need to register this class. So you'll go over here, go to this dispatcher servlet, you need to register the mapping file. So bean name URL handler mapping. Bean handler mapping class. Click next, click finish. This one, okay, you need to register this bean handler mapping. So it is going to this by message.jsp. So let us create one JSP by this name. Dollar of by message. Let us go to this by controller, then by message. Execute it one more time. By message. Clear with this? Okay, because we did not place dollar before it did not retrieve the message. By message. So if you see over here, this is the process. First you have the customer, your request, web container will load the dispatches servlet file, and now we are using the handler mapping. The handler mapping what you're using is this one. There are various handler mapping. From this bean name your handler mapping you're using. So this is step one, then it will connect to this handler mapping. It will decide which handler mapping you're using. So using the bean name handler mapping. Then it will, let me open a Word file. So the what you're using is bean name. So it will map this by.htm, control B. It will map this to this by.controller. That is, if in case if you're having a link with by.htm, okay, if you're having a link with by.htm, if you're having a link with by.htm, then it is going to call this submit. Clear with this? Now after that, okay, when it sees that it has to call this by controller, it will go and execute this code. It will go and execute this code. It will go to this class and execute it. So here that is okay, it goes to this class and executes the code. If you have any form data, you can handle this by this request and response. Over here, you're creating the another object called model and view. Over here, you're creating one more object called model and view. So in this object, you're placing the name of the view, that is by message. This is the name of the view what you have placed in this by message. And then okay, the data what you have added to this model object is by message something XYZ. Till here you are done. That is okay, you are done with the model and the view. Once your model in view is constructed, it again goes back to the servlet. It again goes back to the servlet. Then again it will contact with this view resolver. So over here, if you see, uh, where is that? Dispatcher servlet, bname handler mapping, home controller. In our case, by controller, it is returning model and view, and it is going to this internal resource view resolver. And then from there, okay, it is constructing the name web-inf/jsp/home.jsp. So it's going to this internal resource view resolver, from where okay, it is constructing the actual name of the view. So 1 minute. And finally, it calls the view. And this is how the URL is constructed, and then it calls the view. Is the flow clear? So your controller, it has got controller, it is an interface, and then you've got abstract controller. And from this, okay, you've got simple controllers and the multi-action controller. So when it comes to the multi-action controller, that is one controller can handle more than one request. Whereas when it comes to this, it again has abstract command controller and this one. And the simple form controller and then the form controllers, this will come under your form controllers, and these are your command controllers. That is, if you are submitting any data from the form, it can either be it can be handled either by this simple form controller or by the abstract wizard controller. Or else okay, and the another list what we have is like command controllers. Anyway, we will discuss about that. We will just have a look. So simple, as we have got the various controller types. Simple, controller interfaces abstract. So over here, throwaway controller, you want to handle the request as commands, and then multi-action controller, you want one controller to handle more than one request. Bean command controller or abstract command controller. So over here, abstract command controller and the base command controller is responsible for accepting the form data as well as validating it. And then okay, you have the simple form controller. You need to display an entry form to the user and also process the data entered into the form, and you can go for this. And abstract wizard is if in case okay, if you have like multi-page form entry, then you can go with the abstract wizard form control. Anyway, this one okay, we will cover this tomorrow. The form part we'll cover it tomorrow. Today we have completed just basic flow. Okay, the next okay, we have got various types of controller, and this one we will be discussing it tomorrow. What I suggest you is just go through this basic, like what, because this has a lot of configuration within this. So once you are clear with this flow, and the next is that the code whatever we are going to write is similar to the servlets and the JSP itself, but over here we are making use of the controller, and in the configuration information we are placing it in web.xml file. Just go through this. Tomorrow we will learn how to bind the controllers to the command object. For this we will wind up the session for today, and tomorrow we will deal or tomorrow we will discuss how to handle the form data in Spring application. So bye bye, that's all for today.